Okay. Good morning. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to a special edition of Conversations with Al McFarlane. Here today, we're working with and supporting the phenomenal Hawthorne Huddle, Hawthorne Neighborhood uh, Council. Been around a long time. It's a key foundational institution in North Minneapolis. I'm pleased to welcome and present to open this month's Hawthorne Huddle the executive director of Hawthorne Huddle, and she's the founder of or co-founder of the Hawthorne Huddle, Diana Hawkins. Diana, good morning. Thank you for being here. And just a word of praise for the longevity of the Hawthorne Huddle and Hawthorne Neighborhood Council. I always tell people that insight exists because of the Hawthorne Neighborhood Council, the Jordan Area Council, and Willard Homewood Organization. These organizations funded the creation of Insight back in 1974. And I'm hoping that you'll believe it was a wise investment because we're still strong here in North Minneapolis. Diana Hawkins, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Al. Before we get started, I just want to ask everybody if we could just take a moment in honor of George today and bow our heads and just say his name, George Floyd. That is why we are here today. I have been a long-time community activist of North Minneapolis, and I'm going to tell you, I am hurting all over. So, Al, we are here to find out how we can heal. You know, back in the 60s in the riot, it wasn't like this, but I was told something. It's going to take this village again to come back around. We need to come together as the community and fix it. Back to you, Al.
Thank you. I'm Al McFarlane. I'm pleased to moderate this month's regular meeting of the Hawthorne Huddle. And if you're watching on Facebook, please like it, share it to your networks. You can also monitor this on YouTube. On YouTube, it's Insight News /Al McFarlane or Insight News Al McFarlane to tune in. We want you to share this meeting with your networks, let people know that we're live, and want them to join the conversation. We're monitoring the Facebook feed, and Andrew Bonhoff is here to bring your questions, your comments forward in this morning's program. I'm going to begin by reaching out to State Representative Fu Lee. Representative Fu Lee, good morning. Thank you for being here. Like all of us, you, I'm sure, are concerned about the devastation that has occurred in the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd. Like all of us, I'm sure you have deep feelings about what and how police conduct have failed us. So I want to turn it over to you, first of all, just to express your concerns, your thoughts, and to start this discussion about how, as a community, we begin to address these issues, public policy, police conduct, the economic impact of this event, that on top of COVID-19, the impact there, and how do we begin to think about going forward? Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Al, and thank you, Diana, for organizing this for all of us. I echo the sentiment from Diana. Our community is hurting. It's unfortunate that it has to take a loss of life for all of us to get together to really look at some reforms with regards to our police conduct, police brutality. And I just want to let everyone know, our viewers, folks on the north side, know that we will be coming into special session next week, and myself, along with the members of the Minnesota People of Color Indigenous Caucus, has come up with a police reform product so that we can start having this conversation. What do we need to do so that we can have more transparency and accountability within our police force? And also, to your point, Al, our community right now is hurting with regards to some of the economic impact because of the events of COVID-19 and with the death of George Floyd. And, I really want to respect our community who is hurting and who is mourning that loss of life. But right now, I'm really looking forward to the future, too, to see what can we do to support our community members, and as the vice chair of the Capital Investment Committee, I believe we have an opportunity to use the capital investment bonding bill to provide economic, uh, recovery help for community members on the north side and throughout the city of Minneapolis, throughout the region who has been impacted by this tragedy. And so today, I just want to be on here to really listen to community members, listen to all of you, see what can we do to partner to move the city of Minneapolis forward, the north side forward, and really help address some of the concerns that we have. So just want to leave it at that, and we can dig deeper in depth if we have further questions. Thank you.
Representative Lee, let me ask you a couple of questions just to keep the conversation going. This thing is personal to everybody. I think all of us have been impacted deeply and personally. And in that spirit, I wanted to ask you, where were you when you first heard about what was happening over on 38th in Chicago? What was the first word that you got, just as a neighbor, as a person in the community, but also in your capacity as a legislative leader? What did you first hear about it, and what did you think? What did you fear? What was your first speculation about what the meaning of it was? I'm talking about the actual police incident in which George Floyd died, where we witnessed that on social media.
So I was actually traveling for a family's funeral, and when I hop onto social media, I was devastated. And I was just talking to you right now. I'm getting goosebumps. I have the surge of feeling. I just don't know, and uh, it's tough. For me, serving in office for this is my fourth year, my second term. I could count that over the last 4 years, there's been 3 officers involved death in my district alone on the north side,
Mm.
and it is unfortunate that this situation is uh, in South Minneapolis, and I just hurt. I reached out to my colleagues who were over there, and just mixed emotions. Really trying to figure out what can I do to support my colleagues because I have went through this before, and just having this conversation, I think brings back some kind of trauma, the trauma that our community has been facing, and whether we are the direct we are directly impacted or not, our community is hurting. And
Mhm.
so going forward in our package that we have put out, we want to see what can we put in some investment and some resources in to address some of the trauma that our community members are facing, and also what can we do to partner with community members to help solve this. And right away, in having conversation with my leadership over at the Minnesota House and talking with the administration, I want us to have some dollars in there so that we could, partner up with folks who are on the ground who can provide these kind of services, culturally specific services to help community members who are, hurting, and so that we could heal together. And so uh, I'm still devastated.
Mhm.
Some of these nights I'm going to bed around 2, 3 in the
Mhm.
morning, waking up around 5, 6 in the morning, and my hands are just shaking. And so,
Mhm.
uh,
Well, let me drill down there. So,
mhm,
like all of us, when you get the news on social media that this arrest has resulted in a death, and for me, Representative Foley, it was just totally incredible. I couldn't believe what I was watching, and I watched it maybe 2 times, maybe 3 times, but every time I watched this 7 or 9 minute video, it just created memories and pain. And when I talk about it, it triggers memories. People tell me about knowing that their father or grandfather was lynched at some point in time in the 60s or in the 30s. So it brings back these family stories for Black people about historic and relatively recent accounts of either police and or mob brutality that has resulted in loss of life. And it's not an abstraction, it's personal because it touches our personal histories and stories. So you saw that event and you got this, this pain in your heart and your gut. And then the next day, after the protests began organically, we saw those split and devolve into unbridled anger. Some called it protest, some called it rebellion, some began to call it riot, some began to call it anarchy, some called it all of the above, but we know it had an impact. One of the things we know about is that even though Lake Street was the epicenter, it's where the event occurred, our neighborhood, North Minneapolis, was impacted as well. Not only in the feelings of the residents like you and I have described, but our businesses also were targets of some of the destruction. Can you talk about what you saw or what you know and what you feared, what you thought as that eruption took place and spilled into our community, North Minneapolis?
The first thought that I had when we saw that some of these were coming up to the north side was the impact that's going to have on our small businesses, especially our businesses that are owned by Black and Brown community members. And I just don't know right now what we can do, but I know that right now we're having conversation to really address this, and I just hope that this is just the first conversation that I have with all of you and with hopefully with community members who are watching on what can we do to address the economic impact of what's happening, and know that as we move forward over at the legislature, I want to center the voice of the folks on the north side and what kind of whatever economic recovery package that we have. And that's why I feel like right now there's a great opportunity as the vice chair of the capital investment committee to really partner up with our community members to see what are the needs that you have. Let me know so that we can start addressing that going forward. And I am very conscious about the impact that it has on our local community members, and so just really want to partner up with everyone else.
I'm presenting and suggesting that we start thinking in terms of a Marshall Plan for West Broadway, meaning massive investment in business and agency renovation in the economic infrastructure for North Minneapolis. I am recommending and calling for a Marshall Plan for Lake Street and a Marshall Plan for University Avenue in St. Paul and the extended communities. And I hear you saying that one of the things you're going to be looking at and listening for is how something like that might arise from the community so that you can put forth legislation to make sure that we move towards healing. Do you see things like that? Is that what you're saying?
I do, and I don't know if all of you may be aware, but today Commissioner Grow from the Department of Economic and Employment are hosting a listening session with a business owner who has been impacted by this tragedy. And so I think that that's the starting point for us to have that conversation with the community members, having the ear of the commissioner who, it's directly right next to the governor, so that we can work in partnership, the administration over at the Capitol, us in the Minnesota House, and then, Senator Bobby Joe Champ and Senator Hayden in the Senate to see what we can do to center the voice of the people. And, it's the bonding bill, it's not our, general fund where we can spend it on anything. And so that's why I really want to, going down a little bit the nitty gritty, really focusing on what are some of the bricks and mortars or what are some of the equipments that our businesses need that we could use the capital investment bill to really fund for that and to help support our community members. And so, this conversation and beyond, if we could get down to those details and, what kind of support services, so that if we do have some general fund cash around, that we could provide that additionally to the bricks and mortars for our community members on the north side, to your point, on Lake Street and on University Avenue.
Is there a mechanism for assessing the damage, the impact, and is there a process that you are wherever part of that is calling for the community to create a vision, create a plan? Because I'm thinking, and I think you agree with this, that we have to look at this not as a question of restoration, but a question of transformation. And the imperative of the moment, both in the area of criminal justice and in police policy, is a hard look, hard work, and transformation, not putting things back to where they were, but changing things internally, organically, and moving towards a more humane and transparent criminal justice system that is based in the notion of equity, where Black and brown people, we see ourselves as the owners of the enterprise of justice, not the managed, not the victims, but rather the creators and the sources of the notion and spirit of civic engagement and of justice. And frankly, it's going to take the rest of the society to acknowledge our duty, our right, and our responsibility to be part of the decision-making apparatus. We've been locked out in the past, and we've been blamed for being locked out by saying, oh, they didn't want to come, they didn't want to show up. Not true. There's been a systemic process for exclusion, and that's what has been laid bare by both COVID-19, because it reflects all of the health disparities, compounded by wealth disparities, by economic job disparities, compounded by education disparities, compounded by a series of interconnected things that spell marginalization for people of color, Black and brown people, and poor people in the inner city. So I think this is an opportunity to address all of those because they're all related, and the proper address is a grand vision of what our society can and should be, and how we exercise our voice in building that organically and with the support and through the power of the legislature. Let me ask Kinsey O'Keefe to jump in. Kinsey O'Keefe is the former editor of the North News paper, now headed by Harry Colbert. Great organization, great publication. She has moved on to become the public policy leader for Pillsbury United Neighborhoods. Kinsey, good morning. Unmute your microphone, first of all. And I want you to speak from your position, both as a reporter, editor, and community member, but also in charge of moving public policy considerations at Pillsbury. What's your general impression, and how do you move this conversation forward?
Yeah, so I've been a part of Pillsbury United Communities for almost 5 years now. Up until just about a week ago, I was the editor of North News, a community newspaper and digital news source in North Minneapolis. And what I learned and saw and experienced in the relationships that I forged before, but also really during that time at North News, sparked my interest in policy and advocacy work. And I really recognized that I wanted to have more of a direct impact in terms of changing some of the things that I had seen and felt as a reporter. So Pillsbury United Communities is a 140-year-old organization birthed out of the settlement house movement. And our current mission is all about supporting individuals and communities, particularly Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks in building their power. And we as an organization really understand that building power, there's an on-the-ground component to that, to building strong communities, supporting folks. And we do that through our community centers and through our social enterprises. But more and more we've realized that structural change and really dismantling racist white supremacist systems needs to be an intentional and not just an intentional part of the work, but also a resource part of the work. Again, I've only been in my job officially now for about a week, but my intention is really just to ensure that justice-oriented policies, that anti-racist policies get implemented at every level of government, and it's sort of every institutional level, and not just, my goal is not just to support those policies, but also to ensure that the budgets are there to make that work impactful. I was really struck last night on the watching the My Brother's Keeper conversation on YouTube with the Obama Foundation and Brittany Packnett Cunningham saying that budgets are moral documents, and I think we that resonates deeply with me, and that feels as important to the policy work as ensuring that the budgets match. So just to wrap this up, I think in terms of the types of policies that I and Pillsbury United plan to advocate for, those are criminal justice policies, housing, education, transit, youth, health, really just the main and many areas where we see racial disparities.
Andrew Bonhoff is a staffer at the Hawthorne Neighborhood Council. And, Andrew, you live over in South Minneapolis, I think a couple of blocks from where the 38th in Chicago center for this activity. It would be awesome if you could just sort of speak as a neighborhood resident, kind of give a detail of what happened, because some people may be checking in on this Facebook Live that aren't as familiar with what happened. So maybe you could do something that's sequential and from the point of view of a resident of the neighborhood. Andrew, good morning.
Good morning, Al. Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, so I live, 2 blocks, I guess, as the crow flies, you could say, from 38th in Chicago. It's a corner that my family frequents often, and actually where George Floyd was murdered was actually my bus stop that I take in the winter. So it's certainly something to that, I'll just never be able to look at that piece of asphalt and concrete the same way again. Something that's beautiful about this area, there are several neighborhoods that come together right here, is just the diversity that's kind of come together that's been happening. And a lot of, there are signs in my neighborhood that say, "We love Bryant." People really have a lot of pride in this community. It's an area where we have diversity of restaurants and different shops. There's an art center over there, obviously Cup Foods, which is a little convenience store for a lot of people, an important, actually a pretty big asset for people. And, I think what just after we all heard what happened at that corner, and I think it's telling to show, I woke up Tuesday morning not knowing that had happened 2 blocks from my house Monday night.
The event happened around 8 p.m. Monday, I think, or so.
Yep. And so it just shows that sometimes even that close to your house.
Monday Memorial Day, just to put it in context, so we know.
Yes, Monday Memorial Day.
Mm-hmm.
And watching that video, we all know, we all have our emotions on that. It's it was a disgusting act, and it's just so horrific. And again, to know that happened here, again in this city, is just horrific. But what's come from that, to see that location become this spiritual memorial, this hub of joy and generosity. And last night, somebody actually rolled out a piano to that corner. So there's like a baby grand piano sitting on that corner right now, and people have been playing music, just stepping up one at a time, playing music on that piano. And so, none of that takes away the pain from once again having a Black man taken from us in the city. But as much as media loves to concentrate on the fires, and media loves to concentrate on what's happening negatively in this city and rage, it also shows what's happening on 30th in Chicago right now is just a beautiful human experience. People crying, people laughing. There was a dance party there yesterday. And it's definitely filled me with hope, right? I think so often we're consumed by what the media presents to us, and it can fill us with negative emotions and make us feel like we're never going to achieve what we want to. But then you see that corner right now and what people are doing and sharing, and the true memorial it's become. I had my brother reach out to me and ask, what are they going to do with 30th in Chicago now? You can't, it's art. It's like the whole intersection now is just a work of art. And I said, I hope they treat it like a work of art. I really hope they do. I hope they treat it as a memorial to not just George Floyd, but to all the lives who's lost, but also as a center for the change that is coming, that I think we're finally going to have.
Let's talk about when you started moving around through your through your Tuesday, when the protests began. Mm-hmm. Peaceful, just righteous indignation, disbelief, and incredible. or incredulous, I guess was the word that described how people were feeling. And then the protest towards the evening began to devolve into more anger. What were your thoughts? What were your impressions? And after Tuesday night and Wednesday, when things got to where they were confrontational, what was the progression of thinking that you experienced as a neighborhood resident? What did you feel and what did you think?
Yeah, obviously, so I feel like a fairly unique experience. I'm a white male who lives on the South Side who works for a North Side community. So, I'm always being aware of my privilege and understanding what my feelings are compared to that community I serve. Initially, when after I watched the video, I turned to my wife and I said, "This is going to be big. This is going to be huge." Because working on the North Side, I see just the suffering and the trauma. That's something we work at Hawthorne, right? We focus a lot on historical trauma, and I see how much people carry, and people, because the city, this community, we don't necessarily always give people the options of how to deal with their trauma in a healthy way. I just felt like what we saw was going to happen. It was something I've always kind of held there, knowing that if we see what we saw on Monday happen, that we'd see that. And so, seeing it transform into the riots and just seeing that rage come out physically, seeing that anger come out physically on buildings and on our community. Nobody wants to see their city burn. But at the same time, there's no way I could ever feel the pain and the anger of, or just understand what it's like to be Black in Minneapolis. Even though I work for that community, it's not my, I felt it was not my point to say people need to stop doing that. No doubt, I felt anxiety about it. I felt fear about it. But those are things that I was feeling because of what was happening, not because of what had happened to me over the course of decades and centuries for a community. So, I also think it's interesting, people, again, all of that happened where the police were, right? All that happened at the 3rd precinct. So I think it's important for us to understand that people aren't just angry for anger's sake. It is focused. There is a point where they know there's change. People understand the difference between what happened at 38th in Chicago and honoring George Floyd, where that, again, that's become a memorial. It's become almost, again, like a spiritual experience versus going after the cancer we need removed from the city, going after what is our target of anger and trauma. So, as the weeks progressed, I think, I don't know if leaders were looking for an out, saying, we heard it was outstate Minnesotan, or it was people from outside the state, whether or not that was true.
What do you feel? What do you think?
I don't, it's weird, right? Listen, I don't care where a white supremacist comes. They could come from Florida. They could come from Richfield, right? They could come from northern Minnesota. White supremacist is a white supremacist. I do think, though, we can't just, we can't want something to take the pain or to take responsibility off another, right? So we can't say, oh, actually, never mind. Now we've decided the burning's build because there were people there who are instigators, right? I think it's just important to just understand this experience, and maybe sometimes just take a step back from what media is telling us is happening today and go look what was happening a week ago. Now that we have a week's worth of information, understanding, and also, we talk about community, right? We talk about all these different communities we have in Minneapolis, but also everyone's still an individual. Everyone is still going to feel their trauma as an individual and their pain as an individual. And some people chose to be more physical about that. Some people chosen to be more internal. And I just think you can't pass judgment on anyone right now, right? We are all so raw, and we are all still trying to process this. And it's certainly for me, I've just had white straight male, right? I haven't experienced that there's just, you know, I have an experience that is extremely privileged, and it's just not my place to pass judgment on anyone who has lived something, especially as being Black in Minneapolis, that is not a good experience.
Representative Lee, one thing that I noticed, and I believe this is true, but you can confirm, that Black businesses and Hmong businesses were targeted in North Minneapolis. That's what I understand. Is that true? Do you understand the same thing?
That is my understanding, that our businesses that are Black owned, and just business in general were targeted on the north side. And it is unfortunate that this has happened to our community members who have put their life savings into their business. And I remember reading an article, I don't know if this was on the north side or on the south side, where the business owner of Latin descent, spent 10 years just to get the business started, and overnight it was all gone.
Mm.
And that's just very heartbreaking for all of us. And that's where we, as myself as an elected official, really need to find a way to help address this wrong for our community members who put their life investment into this, and now overnight they don't have anything anymore. And so, it is, a priority for myself and many members of the Minnesota legislature to really help our Black and brown communities who are struggling, especially our business owners who were impacted because of this situation.
I know she's not not anxious to talk, but I'm going to put our friend Ann DeGroot on the spot here. Ann, as a resident in the community, you are working with and invested in trying to create opportunities for young people at North High. How are you dealing with the fallout of both the cry for justice, the protests associated with the George Floyd killing, and the rebellions or uprisings or riots, the damage that occurred afterwards, even in our community, North Minneapolis?
I'm happy to talk, but I also feel like at this point I should often take a back seat, but I will be happy to respond. First I want to just say how proud I am of all of our young people who stepped up and who went out in the forefront of this. That has been true historically, that young people do take the lead, but it is also true now, particularly in this case, our young people of color, that they are out there on the streets protesting in whatever way they are. And I'm really proud of them. I think we need to acknowledge that in our city and recognize what our young people are doing. At the same time, I am concerned about them because of COVID. I am really concerned about that. So I think we need to make sure that we can find ways to test them and care for them if they get sick. We need to make sure that they have health care that keeps them alive for a long time. This disease is bad. And I appreciate and understand why they went out. And I'm just worried about them. I'm a mom. I'm just kind of motherly about this. I don't want them to be getting sick. So I just want to say that about this. I think what I know our young people feel very passionate. And, Al, I think you might know that we have a group at the Youth Coordinating Board called the Minneapolis Youth Congress. It's about 50 young people who do work with us and with our public jurisdictions, so that their tagline, their motto is "No decision about us without us." And they have been meeting and talking. Some of our young people are involved right now in putting together some tapes, some videotapes on mental health and well-being for young people, particularly aimed at this time. And we learn a lot from our young people. And, like everyone, some of our young people are pretty exhausted right now and pretty tired. And some of them have a lot of passion and energy to go forward, and that will ebb and flow. So, part of what I think we are trying to do is make sure that we support our young people in whatever ways we can. And for me, I'm wanting to make sure I support the staff of the YCD to be able to work with our young people. We have a group that goes out called our outreach team, which Diana knows because her son Byron is one of our long-term members of the outreach team. And they go out and engage with young people around the city. And most of our people in that group are Black and brown people. And I know that they are tired and exhausted. So any way that as their boss's boss, kind of, I don't mean to be too hierarchical here, but I can help support them, I will do that, because we need them out there. They are gems and they do great work. So from my perspective, it's really about, making sure we acknowledge our young people and those of us who work with our young people and try to help keep them whole and try to help them move forward in a way that is good for them and good for our community. That's what we're trying to do. So that's kind of a long way to answer your question. I hope I did, but that's really what we're thinking about at the Youth Coordinating Board, is how do we help our young people be in the process of building, moving forward, transformation. Al, I like your word. I think that's right.
And DeGroot, let me say to you, and in saying so, give you praise and thank you. I think it's easy for us to demonize young people. And you have started off by saying you are proud of young people and you praise them for their courage and for their intensity. And even though it's easy for media and communities to be dismissive of young people, you have the presence of mind, and I hear your voice telling us and encouraging all of us to step back, breathe deeply, and understand, appreciate, and accept our responsibility to acknowledge and nurture the gift of life that young people are bringing. And we have to simply stand back and applaud and allow and support them. We can become and be the retaining walls or the railings that allow them the freedom to explore the life and future that they are obligated to create. But this is a co-creating experience. And I think that you are saying to those of us who are older, adult, established, et cetera, let us not be so self-centered and satisfied with ourselves, because we clearly have failed. We've been participants in the failure of society. Not that it's our fault, but we are here. And it's our duty, however, to be supportive of the transformations at hand. And I love the fact that you are acknowledging the role and the power of young people, and you're leading with celebration, not demonizing, not condemning, and not marginalizing their power and their voice. Representative Foley, let me ask you to jump in here again, just on that premise, that thought. I think it's a wonderful thing that you said, and DeGroot. So Representative Foley, impressions, your thought. How do we motivate and engage and support young people? You have to unmute your mic there, Representative.
So I think that this is a great opportunity for our young people. They are the one that are out there on the street who is highlighting the need for us to have this conversation. And as we move forward, I look forward to working with Kinsey, and hopefully she could bring some youth on, into the room to talk with us around some of these reforms that we are thinking about. And I think from my perspective, within the next week or two, that's where we're going to have a lot of movement. And so the young people who has been out on the street, we want them to be in the room with us to talk about why we need this transformational change. And so Ann, Kinsey, I encourage both of you to get the youth connected to myself, and I could get them get them ready to be involved in the process, so that when we're having this conversation, their voice are at the front and center and not being pushed to the back end. And so it's imperative that we as lawmakers focus this on the people who are on the ground, our youth who are hurting and who are asking for their voice to be heard. And it is time that their voice needs to be heard over at the Minnesota State Capitol.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is a special session of Conversations with Al McFarlane. We are I got Senator Hayden calling me on the phone right now. We're asking him to join the call. I just told him I'd call him right back. Hopefully he'll be able to join us in a couple of seconds. But this is a special edition of Conversations with Al McFarlane, held in support of and to present the monthly session of the Hawthorne Huddle. The Hawthorne Huddle is a 30-year community engagement process created by Hawthorne Neighborhood Council, co-created by the executive director, Diana Hawkins. This huddle has been a powerful convening place for North Minneapolis and corporations and public policy, public service, and community leaders for a generation now. And Diana, I just want to thank you again and thank the Hawthorne Neighborhood Council and the Hawthorne Huddle for the continuity that you provide in creating a place for robust conversation about how we move our communities forward. Diana, take a minute again and talk about the other aspect of the council's work, because you're also working on opioids. And so we've got three things here. We've got opioids. That's been a focus of, youth and community exposure and prevention awareness for opioids. Then we have COVID coming in, laying bare the inequities. And then on top of that, this particular egregious event that also lays bare the inequity in the area of community policing or police policy, all these things on top of each other. It's the perfect storm. And you can decry that if you want to. You wouldn't be blamed for feeling that this is too much. Or you can say, you know what, it is what it is. Let's get busy. Let's get to work. And that's what you're doing, Diana Hawkins, and that's what the Hawthorne Neighborhood Council is doing. It always has done that. So take a minute to just explore what we said so far. I'm going to try to reach Senator Hayden on the phone while you're doing that, okay?
Al, I think he actually is on.
Is he on now?
Yeah, I think he is on. So why don't we come back to him and let my big brother talk first, okay?
Senator Hayden, I don't see you, but maybe you're...
I see him.
Okay.
I see him.
Senator Hayden, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
He's got to unmute his mic.
Okay. Senator Hayden, do you, if you're here, just, I'm not seeing you on my screen.
Yeah, I'm here.
There you are.
I was trying to somehow get let in through the firewalls or whatever.
Yeah.
Good. I missed the question, but I certainly will answer any questions or join whatever the part of the conversation you like.
Sure. Well, the general question is, how do we, let's review what happened, and let's review why it happened, and let's review what the impact is for our communities in general. And in that context, let's talk about the need for reform in our criminal justice system in general, and specifically about police conduct. And this horrific incident gives us an opportunity, requires us to examine these challenges. So start from there.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks all the folks at the Hawthorne Huddle, and thank to your great representative Fu Lee. And I'm not saying that because I'm looking at him. I'm just telling you that he is a fantastic representative. I spent 3 years in the House, so I know what it is to be a good House member. And Fu, our Representative Lee, has been able to navigate the challenges of figuring out kind of what to do and how to be an effective voice for the community, but also navigate the process, if you will. And I really do want to shout him out for that. Thank you guys at the Hawthorne Hustle. Thank you, Diana and others. Ann's been a long time servant in this community. I'm glad to be there. And I say that because I spent a lot of my formative years on the North Side, and many of you know my dad, Peter Hayden, speaking of opioids, who has started Turning Point in 1976 and is still going strong, helping people deal with addiction, or what we now call substance use disorder. The incident that happened in my district on 38th in Chicago, unfortunately, and rest in power, Mr. Floyd, was essentially the igniter to a powder keg, if you will, that we call systemic racism. And so we've been dealing with this for a long time. all of the disparities that I think we got comfortable with. Essentially, people call us the land of 10,000 lakes. I call it the land of 10,000 disparities, because every single quality of life indicator that you would have, the five big groups: African American, African immigrants, Latinos, American Indians, and then, as Fu could tell you, our friends in the Hmong communities. We have to disaggregate a little bit of the data in the Asian community, but when you pull out our friends in the Hmong community, they're right with us. And we have been talking about it. We have been fighting it. We've done equity bills. We've had, it seems like Minneapolis public schools change their curriculum each and every year to try to address it. We have health disparities, though we have the greatest healthcare system in the world here in Minneapolis, led by the #1 hospital in the world, depending on what the issue is, the Mayo Clinic. We have the biggest company in Minnesota, Fortune 7 company, and United Healthcare is the biggest health insurer. And I highlight them not to disparage them, but just to say how superior and excellent we are when it comes to everything, with the exception of how it works for people of color. So if we just got to say it. We just got to say we got a problem, and our problem is as deeply rooted as it is in Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and all of those states that we like to point to as being the racist state. We got a problem. We got to get out of denial. And Mr. Floyd's death, for whatever reason, I think because it was live in color, because of technology, just pointed it out. We got to see it. You couldn't deny that, right? Anything else you do, if you're not there to see it, you can always in your mind, well, maybe there was a problem. Maybe he didn't do what he said. Maybe he didn't comply. Maybe he didn't. Well, we couldn't deny the 9.5 minutes that we saw. Nobody could deny it. And so the question is now, after we, lay Mr. Floyd to death, is what do we do now? And we got to address it in a way that's transformational, I think is the word that we're starting to use. And so the House has come out with a series of ideas that could be easily turned into bills. Us in the Senate are working off of that kind of template and kind of thinking about what we could do in special session. And what I would say is that it's got to be transformational. I'm 53 years old. When I was 5 or 6 years old and I lived on 35th and Clinton, me, like a lot of us, have moved north to south, back and forth. My mother taught me how to cross the street. And once I figured out how to say go on a green light and don't go on a red light, she said, if the police stop you, do what they say. And now, you were here during those times. The police have been beating us up and taking us down to the river and beating us up and dropping us back off in our community for years. So I am proud of the young people. I am proud, including my own daughter and son, who are getting active in this and get a chance to see it. But for some of us who's been around Minneapolis for a long time, there's nothing new about this. So I would say it's time to transformationally change. We can figure out the interim, but we got to start with the post board who license police. We got to start with figuring out how we can get police to live in our community again. When I was a little boy, at least some of the African-American cops that I knew, they lived in the community. We got to be able to get that. We have to diversify the police force so that I think it's much harder. Doesn't mean that you can't have a bad cop who looks like us, but I think that by and large, if people live in the community and look like you, right, you have a much different relationship with you. And I know, like right now, there's some controversy about getting rid of the SROs or the school cops. Well, that's just directly related to the group that we have here today. You guys have a phenomenal individual, Charlie Adams Jr. and Tone. Those guys, I grew up with them, and they're phenomenal, and they'll do a good job. So, I don't want our support of that to be directed to just them as individuals, but it really is the literal fraternity that they belong to, not by choice, because I believe a lot of them wouldn't have voted for them, but that paternalistic organization called the Minneapolis Police Federation is complicit 100% in Mr. Floyd's death. They facilitated a culture and an atmosphere that allowed that to be okay. That scared people to say don't do nothing if you do see something. So we got to figure that out. We got to change that culture. You know, there's something that, in the military, it says, if you see somebody do something wrong and you don't do nothing, you're equally as wrong, right? So we have to be able to, and I got to remember, Fu might know it's like duty to tell or duty to compel. Senator Disick knows it well. Well, we have to be able to put some things in there that has a level of accountability that fundamentally changes the police. The other thing we got to do it with community. We got to do it with young people, right? We have to figure out, we have to demilitarize after 9/11. We essentially militarized our police force. So the next thing you know, we went from having police cars or even officers walking the beat to them riding down the street in something that looks like a tank, right? And weapons that were used in war. So if you're riding down north to South Minneapolis and you're not getting out your car, you're not on the beat, you're scared of the people, and you're walking down something that looks like a tank, well, that's part of the culture. Then you start acting as if the citizens are your enemies. If you go to Baghdad or Fallujah or Beirut or these kind of places, maybe, you don't know who's who. But all of a sudden now we're the way and the approach to policing in this town and frankly in America is that the citizens are the enemy. That you're not trying to de-escalate, you're not trying to have a conversation, you're not trying to build a relationship. You're simply just trying to arrest and detain and throw them in. And if they don't, then you're ready to use lethal force. We have the police have training, survival training, as they call it. And basically it's a militaristic training that basically says you do whatever you do so that you can get back home to your family. Well, Mr. Floyd couldn't get back home to his family. And a whole bunch of Jamar Clark couldn't get back home to his family. There's a whole bunch of other folks that couldn't get back home to their family. There's no a realm of de-escalation, relationships. There's no relationships that are built. I shouldn't say that of all cops, but certainly a good number of them. Heck, we saw that just on the Thursday and Friday when things went to heck. I'll try not to cuss on here. The cops quit, didn't show up. They were, a lot of these guys in the military, we call it dereliction of duty, right? They didn't do the fundamental things that they were even responsible for as some sort of show, like that they don't have to do it. Bob Kroll is acting like a dictator. He's trying to subvert the Constitution, trying to work with Senator Gazelka in the Senate to subvert the governor's constitutional responsibility. I mean, I don't know. I just woke up a little hot. I guess it's hot outside and I got a lot of people in my neighborhood and I got a lot of destruction. I've worked for well over 20 years, well before I got in the legislature. Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association, the chair. I worked at Hennepin Powderhorn Partners in the integrated setting there with Andrea and others to build Lake Street. And we built Lake Street in the image of the community, right? We built each street in the image of the community. We're building West Broadway in the image of the community. In 2 days, it was all gone. 20 years worth of work with a collective of people, not just me. Vandria was here. There are many people. So I don't want to suggest that I was the czar of Lake Street. I'm saying that there were tons and thousands of people that we have worked hard in order to rebuild Lake Street. And just a little bit of history. And when they built the freeway, before the freeway, Lake Street was a vibrant kind of economic corridors where you buy your cars. They built the freeway, all the autos, automotive folks, dealerships moved out to the suburbs. Southdale opened up, all the shopping left there, and Lake Street was there forever. As y'all know, it's kind of an abandoned place where human trafficking was going on, is what we call it now. We call it something else then. We had X-rated movie theaters where the Heart of the Beast puppet theater was. And we transformed that, and with Black, Hmong, African immigrants, a lot of Latino businesses, and they took that from us in a couple of days because essentially this white supremacist society is gonna go out and put his boot on the neck of a Black man. And so we got to change it. We got to change it fast. And I'm glad that the young people are involved, and I'm glad that they're holding us accountable because incrementalism isn't going to work. And that's what I'm telling my colleagues each and every day. It's a transformational process, and the time is now. So I probably said more than you wanted, Al. I just wanted
Senator, this is perfect. Thank you so much. Let me ask you a couple of questions. One, is there both the will and $1 billion for the transformation of Lake Street? Is there $1 billion for the transformation of University Avenue in St. Paul? Is there $1 billion over some period of time for the complete transformation of West Broadway and Lowry Avenue, the business corridors in North Minneapolis? Is there the will? And if there's the will, can we create a process that generates that amount of capital or the capital required, and in a process that specifically supports existing and new emerging businesses owned by Black people, by African immigrants, by Hmong people, by our Asian brothers and sisters, by Latino brothers and sisters, and by white brothers and sisters who are residents of our community? Is there a process that recognizes those who are here in place right now, in businesses that have been challenged or shut down by both this event and COVID-19, the double whammy here? But is there an opportunity in this to re-envision, recreate a new, vibrant, transformed set of communities? What do you think, Senator Hayden?
You know, I said a speech earlier today, and it was old adage, if there's a will, there's a way, right? So I believe that there is will. We are working collaboratively in the People of Color Indigenous Caucus that Fu and I are proud members of. And so we are prepared to put together not only a series of packages on police reform, but also a significant amount of money, potentially in the bonding bill, or others, in order to start that process. So the answer is yes, there is the money, right? We as Black and brown people have the will. The question really becomes, as it always becomes, this state is 80% white. The legislature is reflective of that. I don't even think we're up to that 20% threshold yet by far. The question is, does my white allies in business, in the legislature, right, the congressional delegation, are they ready? Or do they want to do it, or do they want to keep looking the other way? That denial has put us in this situation. So we are ready. We've been ready, right? We have continued. We fight this fight every single day. So the question has to be, is our white allies ready? And I say that even bigger than the legislators, because they're the ones that put the legislators there. So are they going to pick up the phone and say, you know what? I'm going to start calling names who I shouldn't do it. You know what? Warren Limmer in Maple Grove. You know what? Senate Majority Leader Paul Gazelka. You know what? Julie Rosen from Southern Minnesota. You know what? You know, I'm picking on the Senate right now.
Yeah,
but we demand change. We saw what happens. We don't like living in a society. We don't like being compared to Southern segregated, historically racist states. We're better than that. You know what? The president of General Mills, the president of United Healthcare, the president of Blue Cross Blue Shield. I don't know all those people by name, and I don't want to call them out. But I will call out the Charlie Weaver of the Minnesota Business Partnership, right? Doug Loon, president of Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. I do know them, so I can call them out. I'm calling out people I actually know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Are you ready? Are you ready to put your money in? Are you ready, R.T. Ryback of the Minneapolis Foundation, to lead us? And Shonda Smith Baker, which I know her personally my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Are y'all ready at the McKnight Foundation to put it together and actually get this moving? Are we ready to collectively come together? And if we do that, we have some of the biggest companies in the world. We have one of the best and greatest states. And we have some of the most sophisticated philanthropic groups. And then the citizens of this community, are you ready to put the pressure on them? And if we did that, we could get this done. We could have this thing ready by the time the spring comes, when the cherry blossoms and all those flowers come. We can have those businesses up and running and have this rebuild. If we can build $1.5 billion Viking stadium, a soccer stadium, a hockey stadium, We can build condos go up every single, or luxury apartments go up. You look around, if you don't go downtown and you go back a month later, there's another building up. Got it. We can do it. It's just, do you want to do it? And do you want to do it for the betterment of the community? And do you want to do it in partnership? So what we do build is a reflection of the community and not a reflection of them.
So let me take that even deeper, Senator Hayden. You pointed out some of the likely resistance points in members of the Republican Party in the legislature, in the Senate in particular, where you are. But I raised the question from within the community about our quote unquote friends. Sometimes people that we expect to be progressive in their posture and in their attitude end up, and this is not new. I mean, even back in the old days of civil rights, the friends of the movement would say, go slow. You've heard that before. We were looking for voting rights, looking for equal housing, looking for police protection. And even those who were so-called advanced liberal thinkers would come back to those of us on the street. And they would say, yeah, we know there's problems that are historic and systemic, but you have to go slow. You can't do it overnight. So even today, our friends, our progressive and liberal leaders, as often as not, from my point of view, are equally complicit in resisting or foot dragging when it comes to genuine engagement, involvement, and resourcing the leadership, the genius of Black and brown people and communities. How do we look at that in a way that's hard, that's real, and that allows everybody to say exactly what we mean, that's based on our experience and our expectation that our engagement be considered real? Right now, it's not. What do you think?
Well, we've been going slow, and look where we're at. We're going slow, and we just built up a big powder keg that just blew up. And much like COVID-19, it's infected the whole world. Everybody is rising up all over the world. I've talked to people in London and in Turkey and in Spain and in all parts of the country. So if we keep going slow, we got a problem. It's going to affect you, right? We're letting in all of these nefarious characters in that are embedding themselves, that are hell-bent on destruction. And I saw it live and up close. They took 20 years worth of incremental process and blew it up in a couple of days. So I think, but just to be, just in a real practical way, I think everybody's watching us. Every single elected official in the country, but certainly Minnesota, is being watched very closely. And so I want to work collaboratively. I've been known to work collaboratively on both sides of the aisle. I've been able to figure out. That's why I commended Representative Lee. I really think I don't want him to be. I don't want him to be me, because sometimes you might get yourself a little trouble. But I do think he's been really effective in understanding. He's vice chair of the bonding committee, capital investment in the House, and he's been extremely effective in getting that committee's attention to communities like ours. So I think that it is time for us to hold everybody accountable, including our progressive partners. It is time for every progressive organization to lean in. It is time for them to, and I will say this as well. It is time to let us lead. It is time to let people of color lead. It's time to let Representative Lee lead. It's time for Senator Bobby Joe Champion to lead. Not that there weren't leaders. Maybe I said it better than that. That we were already leaders. It's time to listen to us.
That's right.
It's time. I said it, and Representative Lee will tell you we're on the call, and I don't always tell our caucus calls. And a couple of people were got a little wrinkled, but I said, listen to me and Bobby, because we're at the other end of that boot, and the other end of that bullet. Right? It doesn't mean that we don't work collaboratively with everybody else in the community, but listen to us. We can tell you what people need. We're the ones that got the target on our back, literally. Let us lead. We're going to empower everybody we can to be able to get this work done. We can't do it, but listen to us, because if you're listening to me, I'm listening to Al McFarlane. I'm listening to everybody else in the community. right? And so when you listen to me, it's not Jeff Hayden's ideas that I just came up with in my head. Sometimes I do, or not just Bobby Joe Champion or whatever. We're listening to the community and we're reflecting back what it sounds like, right? I'll tell you right now, and I gave this, well, I won't give this analogy, but you can do everything that you want and you can spend a lot of money, but if the people don't like it, if it doesn't taste right to them and it doesn't feel right to them, they're not going to do it. So why not ask them what they want? I got on the call talking about young people. I'm listening to young people. My daughter was at the march and one of the organizers. There's a group, I got 3 or 4 groups of young people who are calling me with ideas and a process, and they're multicultural. Like, listen to them. They're our next generation of leaders. If you want to understand how you deal with Black people, or in particular Black men, go find some Black men and listen to them.
Talk to them.
Don't start telling them what they want, right? You know, I like
Ask them
I
what
like
they
a cup of
need.
coffee with 1 Splenda, not 2. I don't like sugar, right? If you're gonna give me something and you want me to drink it, give it to me the way that I like, right? And trust that I can do it, and don't put so many strings and things on it that I can't use it, right? We got organizations out here that get a lot of money because they got great grant writers and they got a good compliance department, and they don't get nothing done. And then we got people out here who's getting the work done, and they don't spend all
Don't
their
get
time
nothing.
writing grants and doing all this compliance stuff. Our philanthropic organizations are mirroring our corporations, the backroom operations that you have there to get the money. And I'm sorry, I guess I'm just a little woke up on the wrong side of the bed, but it's not effective. It's not getting to the streets, right? Because the people who get it spend all their time making sure that they can report on it, and the people who are doing the work ain't got no time to be sitting up here filling out 1,000 forms trying to tell you how they spent their money. So you inherently don't trust them. So you put as many barriers in the way so that they can't do it. And then at the end of the year, you show a report, you feel good about yourself because you gave them some money, but then you look at the outcome and the impact and it's nil. Come on, we got to do better than this.
Fully jump in. Reflections, just feedback to what Senator Hayden is saying.
I think that Senator Hayden is right. You know, right now we know that we are hearing from the community. We are in conversation with the folks on this call regarding the police reform. You know, Chair Carlos Mariani from the west side of St. Paul has been having conversation with folks on the ground, and it is time that our colleagues listen to us, like Senator Hayden said. And that's what we're seeing in the House right now, where our People of Color Indigenous Caucus is leading the effort. And, you know, we're working in partnership with our senators, Senator Bobby Joe Champion, Senator Hayden, and all of those folks in the Senate to really see what can we get through. And I'm really excited, you know, and I'm glad that we have folks like, you know, Senator Hayden and Senator Bobby Joe Champion over at the Senate to really provide that perspective for all of us who are a little bit newer. But, you know, we're really, we're ready to engage with our colleagues, our House leadership to start having these conversations that, you know, we may not, you know, support a bonding bill without any investment in our community, especially in Minneapolis and St. Paul, our communities of colors who are being impacted by this strategy. And so I just know going forward that we are in constant communication, and we are pushing our colleagues and the governor to really invest in our communities in Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Diana, I think we're moving towards the end of the program. This has been a wonderful and rich, I call it a robust conversation. Again, thanks to the Hawthorne Huddle, Hawthorne Neighborhood Council for convening, as you do every month, as you have for the past 30 years, this year, 25 years this year,
Yes.
doing the Zoom meeting in respect to the challenges of gatherings during the COVID-19 crisis, but certainly addressing topical issues of community, of health, of justice, of youth, of equity for our community. So this has been wonderful. I want to close it though by sort of going through the people that are on the panel for a final impression. And I'm going to leave the final impression with Jeff Hayden again. I want to start with, first of all, Ann, then Andrew Bornhoff, then if Kinsey is still here, have her comment, then Representative Thule, and finally Jeff Hayden again, a summation and some marching orders. Diana, you to close the meeting off when we're all done. So before we do that, just a comment about the Hawthorne Huddle and the mission and the outcomes we desire from this conversation today. Diana, that would be for you first of all. Yeah, I'll hear you.
Thanks, Al. Thanks, Representative Lee. Thanks, Senator Hayden, and everyone else on the call. The outcomes that we're really looking for today is we are willing for the next couple of months, not next month, because the huddle won't meet, but I would say August and September, to use the huddle as a convening place for people to gather and figure out what it is and how we are going to heal, number one, and number two, how we are going to work together. Like I said, it's time for this village to come back together.
Andrew, jump in here, Andrew, just as an organizer and a communicator and staff person at Hawthorne Neighborhood Council, impressions and what you want to see come out of this kind of meeting.
Yeah, now is the time for participation. Now is the time for action, right? So I know that that can be hard for some of us, and it's time consuming for everyone. But I guess from the Hawthorne neighborhood's perspective, we want to see the best people in our community gathering together. And the Hawthorne Neighborhood Council, I know, speaking as a staff member, is willing to be there to assist you to make, in particular for us, West Broadway. Let's rebuild West Broadway. Let's make that a strong, vibrant place, a great place for our community. But even before we have West Broadway to meet at, let's meet together now. And the Huddle is an extraordinary place for those conversations.
And Kenzie, please come on with your comments, your thoughts representing the vision and the value that Pillsbury United Neighborhoods brings to our community.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here, and thank you for including me in this conversation. What happened to George Floyd was violent and tragic and unconscionable, and it's part of a 400-year history, as so many folks have said before me. It's time for change. Change is overdue. That is the position of Pillsbury United. That is my personal position. And I guess just to sort of make a personal commitment and also an institutional one, I really see my work in this moment as shifting the will of white folks, divesting of power, of money. And I just completely agree with Senator Hayden that it is time to follow the lead of people of color, particularly Black people in this moment around this particular issue. So that's where I am.
Thank you so much. Andrew, take it from there.
I agree with what Kenzie just said about as a white person, just saying, you know what, I don't have to be in lead. I'm not in lead. We need to move back. We need to be supportive. We need to be helpful to communities. We need to do everything that we can to support institutions to change. I'm really proud. I leave today feeling very proud of our community and excited about the kinds of things I heard here today, because I think it can be a transformational moment. And it needs to be. It's time. It's way past time. And I just am excited about the opportunities our young people will have to help us with this. And really want to do what I can to encourage them to do what they need to do to make things change and transform. Thanks for hosting, Al. I appreciate it. And I'm excited to go forward today now. Thank you.
Before I call on Representative Fu Lee, just a comment from Bev Lutz. She says, wonderful conversation. Thank you, Diana, and thanks, Al, for making this possible. She said it's totally worth getting up for this morning. Please do more of these. And she said, thank you to everyone who spoke this morning. I appreciate you. Well, Bev Lutz, thank you for the work you do in community, for listening, for leaning in, and for just commenting. So thank you so much. What everybody can do is capture this program on Facebook Live, either the Al McFarlane Facebook page or the Insight Facebook page. We post it to the Hawthorne Facebook page as well. Get it and start a watch party. Share this. Let's have this conversation go viral in the community. I can tell you that this program will be broadcast tonight at 8 o'clock on KFAI. So we're using all available platforms to communicate these ideas, these stories. Obviously, this will be a lead story in Insight News. I'm sure North News will be carrying a report on this as well in the upcoming editions that they are doing and wonderfully. So then let me go to Representative Fu Lee just for a summation, a reflection, Representative.
Thank you, Al, and thank you, Diana, for organizing this and inviting me to partake in this, and for all our participants for the conversation. For myself, I stand ready to work with everyone, everyone in North Minneapolis, in the city of Minneapolis, with my legislative counterparts like Senator Hayden. And, we have to understand that we are mourning right now, and, recovery is next. But I think that what I take away from this is that we need big transformational change. And so within the next week, we have the opportunity to do the recovery and to start on that transformational change. And so I look forward to working with all of you, and for the folks that are working with our youth like Kenzie, and definitely find an avenue to connect them with us so that we can start having them as part of the conversation, where we see that they are out there right now, they are driving that change, and I look forward to working with them to see what can we do to move Minnesota forward for everyone. So thank you.
And then I'm going to have Diana formally close the meeting, but before that, Senator Hayden. Senator Hayden, one thing we haven't discussed this morning, I want you to share, give our listeners and viewers an update on the legal processes that are going on right now. Not that you're a lawyer, but you are close as anybody to this entire sequence of things that are happening. First of all, the event on Memorial Day evening, within, I think, 48 hours, the mayor, and I have to always give credit to Jacob Fry. I tell you that as a communicator and a resident, I am pleased and impressed and grateful for his courage and willingness to come forward, stating a position that this conduct was unacceptable, and the consequent firing of the 4 officers involved major. And then things have happened since that time. So I'm going to ask you to sort of go through that process and summarize what has happened from your point of view, Senator Hayden, up to yesterday's announcements, including the the appointment and the charges announced by AG Keith Ellison, and prior to that, the State Human Rights Department's filing of a lawsuit against the City of Minneapolis Police Department. So summarize kind of what has happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've actually done a pretty good job. I mean, Jacob was pretty swift in firing the officers, even though usually you take a lot more time in which to do that, because there are some things in statute, frankly, in state law, in the collective bargaining agreement, that doesn't make mayors do that until they have, what they have. And Jacob called me and just said he was in outrage, and he just said that he is going to do that. I thought that was a really good sign. And I will also say that I think that Mayor Fry gets a little bit of heat, and maybe even Governor Walz, for the first 2 days of the protests where a lot of destruction happened. And I don't mean to speak for them, but I think that they were trying to be as sensitive as they possibly could to the community and not re-traumatizing them with a heavy police force, because they had already saw a heavy police force. And in that, there were infiltrators inside, outside. It's once again, it's kind of quite like Minnesota to say, oh, it was those people from Texas and Florida. Well, I have to tell you, it was the people right here. Mm-hmm. People from right around this community, mm-hmm, who kind of activated like a sleeper cell and tore us up. And the delay in the response, the heavier handed response, was out of respect for communities of color and their allies who were traumatized by this, right? And then we had to finally move in with a much more heavier response. And it also was the lack of duty from the Minneapolis Police Department. We just have to say it and say it like it is. And so from there, we saw the arrest of the officer, and then We also saw a conversation that the county attorney had with the U.S. Attorney, and people said, "Oh no, we can't do that." And I don't say this lightly. I know Mike Freeman, and I'm not suggesting anything that he's not a competent individual, but he was out of tune. When you hear a song, you play the piano, and it's not in the right tune. He was out of tune. And so we pushed for the governor about it, and got Keith, who's in tune, by the way, of the community, and in the way that he speaks and his sentiment. He represented you guys over there well in the state legislature and in Congress, and still lives in the community, right? And so he's in tune with what the community, and by the way, he happens to be a Black man, and the theme is "Let Black Men Lead." And then he reviewed the case with all of his folks and upgraded the charges to second-degree murder, and then aiding and abetting a second-degree murder, and arrested those former officers, and now they'll go through the legal process. I'll state that we still have a process, we still have due process. It still is important to go through the process, and they have the right to mount a defense, right? Because what we're asking is to take their liberty away. I think they should go to jail for the rest of their lives for what they did. However, that will be, they'll go through that process, and that'll be up to a jury to make that decision, a jury of their peers, as they say. And so we should go through that process. And those that would have any remote criticism of Attorney General Ellison, we know Keith as a fierce defender, progressive, and defender of what's right in our community, but right now he's our lawyer, right? And right now he needs to do it the legal way and the right way, and he needs not to say things that we could jeopardize the trial. So I would tell folks, and I know we're anxious, and we want to hear it, and we want to hear that fiery firecracker Keith who's going to say it, but allow him to be the lead lawyer, the lead prosecutor, so that we can put these gentlemen in jail, because we all know that that's where they are. But the legal process is going to require him to have some restraint in how he goes about it, so that he doesn't jeopardize the case. So I do hang around a few lawyers, Al, but that's kind of how I see it. And we'll be praying and giving Keith the strength. He is more than capable and more than qualified. And frankly, this is his moment. And I think he's going to do well to put together the kind of legal team. And as he says, let the evidence lead them to convict these gentlemen of this heinous crime. But we do have to have some restraint to allow Attorney General Ellison to be able to do that.
Great. Well, I'm going to ask Diana to close the meeting, but I want to first of all thank you, Diana, and thank you, Ann, and the members of the Hawthorne Huddle for allowing me to moderate and present this as a live event on Facebook. And I want to tell people that are listening, if you like this kind of conversation and can support doing this again, we want to do it again. Hit like, share this, create a watch party. Let's try to make these robust conversations go viral. I want to remind you also to share through your networks that this program will be presented tonight at 8 o'clock on KFAI Radio 90.3 FM. We're going to be doing for the next foreseeable period an evening program 5 nights a week, 8 o'clock on KFAI, recapping, representing things we discuss on Conversations with Al McFarlane as we do these Facebook Live sessions every day. Diana, thank you so much, and you can close the meeting.
First of all, I would like to really thank everybody, and Ann doesn't know that I'm going to do this, but Al, I would like you to invite everyone to come back in August so we can have another conversation around this. And I really invite Senator Hayden and Representative Lee to come back and just give us an update, because by then we're closed next month because we're off. But in August, we should have some real answers. And I would like to invite the community as well to come on and voice their opinions on how they feel. And with that, I'm done.
Thank you all,
everybody,
so much, and we'll see you next time. Check it out tonight on KFAI 90.3 FM. Thank you all.
And look for us in August.
All right.